Welcome to a special live stream of the resource on peace. I'm your host, Dr. Terry Jory. We're excited to be live streaming from Santa Barbara Colleges of Law, where our own Sofia Collin, a second-year law student, will be presenting the symmetry of justice and its practical applications in peacebuilding at Notre Dame University's Peace Conference via Zoom. Sofia's panel is titled Reimagining Justice, and her project presents a portrait of law as a restrictive, bounded law, and proposes the idea of unbounded law as an alternative. It will show a practical application of such law to de-escalate conflict and build trust and respect and ultimately more peaceful communities. The initiative seeks to support and cultivate positive relationships between police and citizens and between citizens themselves by offering avenues to recognize and celebrate positive action in our communities through the exchange of peace pins. What is essential to the role of peacekeeper is that they promote and celebrate peace. In order to celebrate and cultivate peace, this peace pin project posits that meritorious action, not just reprehensible action, should be acknowledged within the law. Justice, when symmetrical, is its fullest expression. We are honored to share Sofia's talk with you.
I would just like to thank the Kroc Institute and Notre Dame University for so generously including me in your discussion of peace and justice. I am profoundly grateful to be a part of this conference and to stand in the light of your exceptional speakers. I would also like to extend another thank you. This presentation, although discussing law and crime as a whole in abstract terms, will also address practical, real-world applications where the words we enshrine as law manifest as action or inaction in our daily lives. We will be discussing the police. I understand this is an extremely complex subject, and in many lives, a deeply painful realm of our justice system, which, when discussed, requires the utmost respect, patience, and understanding as a community. It is my wholehearted intention to discuss this subject with as much grace and love as possible. I implore the audience to also remain open-hearted as audience members' experience with the police or as police officers themselves are diverse. And I thank you for being here with me today to approach this important and difficult subject. We are all pillars in the house of justice. Our beliefs and experiences are the true strength of our common house. The goal of this discussion is to cultivate peace through a greater expression of justice. It is my hope to build bridges and help others do the same. The presentation will roughly fall into three parts. 1, the philosophical background. 2, the need for symmetry in law. And 3, practical applications of unbounded law. As we reach a new section, I will provide a more detailed outline of each section. Ideally, I would be able to pause after each section and take questions or clarify things, but I'm going to have to go straight through because of the 15-minute limit, and I look forward to hearing your questions and having further discussions about the overview at our discussion at the end of our presentations. Philosophical background. Let us consider action charitably, with a mind to how virtue plays an inextricably vital role in justice and in human flourishing. And there will be two overarching philosophical concepts. The first that we'll discuss is aesthetic ethics in 4 parts. The second, the virtue heuristic, which I will address one facet of. Philosophical background, aesthetic ethics, the gaze. It is important to view action and people as works of art, with care and open-mindedness as if viewing the creation of beauty in a museum. Aesthetic appreciation cultivates peace by cultivating an environment of meaning and understanding. Approaching a person or event as beautiful, like a work of art, allows for one to not immediately jump to a preconceived notion or conclusion, but rather seek meaning, context, and correlation in a thing otherwise obscured or made invisible by a person's preconceived notions. Second, the method. The how of an action is just as important as the what of an action. What the action achieves, that is, the form of an action, or how an action or goal is achieved, is just as important as what is achieved. The overall form of action contributes to the overall morality or success or content of that action. Take, for instance, an individual who graduates from a difficult educational program. But let's say that person did it by cheating. Or let's take an example of someone who is very wealthy but benefited from forced labor. The achievements are negated by the way they were achieved. The how of how one gets to a certain place is just as important as what is achieved. Second, the whole. An aesthetic is a positive evaluation and harmony of attributes that seek to cultivate peace, which can be directly applied in designing policy. An action achieves an ethic if it achieves a harmony with the whole of a societal aesthetic. The mirror. What one sees in art and ultimately in another person is partly oneself and our own experiences. When we see ourselves in the mirror, we can better negotiate our interactions in a more meaningful and peaceful way. The virtue heuristic. The virtue heuristic posits that harmful action is a result of virtue in conflict. That is, that harmful action is a product of an agent's desire to do the right thing, and when caught between two virtues, ultimately do the wrong thing by being unable to uphold all virtues in a given situation. By viewing harmful action as ultimately the product of virtue in conflict, we are able to find that in every harmful action is actually a good action, and that ultimately no action can be entirely bad, or that any person isn't ultimately bad for their action. Now, we shall discuss the need for symmetry in law. The first category is bounded law, which is the law that we have currently in our society, which prohibits action. It prevents citizens from doing bad deeds. And law is a weapon to discourage citizens from committing harmful deeds by punishing those who commit them. It demarcates right and wrong in a bounded concept. If you go over the bound, then you transgress, you receive a harmful consequence. And it's reactive as it anticipates an action and goes into effect as soon as a transgression has occurred. And then I will propose unbounded law as a symmetrical addition to our bounded law system, which encourages action. It helps citizens to aspire to good deeds. Law is an instrument of peace, not retribution. It celebrates and acknowledges good deeds. Law that cultivates morality, and it does not embody morality itself. In addition, it's action because it's operative before harm occurs. It's justice that is working to create and promote prosperity, and it's operative after in resolution of harmful action by exploring the virtue heuristic. Bounded law. The concept of bound, to set boundaries, to limit, to confine with the bounds, to mark the boundaries of. To limit itself, be limited, to form the boundary. This is a language that keeps in and keeps out and clearly delineates right action from wrong action. What is bounded law? It prohibits, it prevents citizens from doing bad deeds. Governments have been and currently are structured but what I call the bounded law, law that restricts people physically and intellectually. It's restricted physically because it instructs people what actions they cannot enact, such as do not speed, do not commit assault, do not enter others' property without permission, etc. Bounded law is physically restrictive as punishments are tangible consequences to bounded law, such as imprisonment, fines, and the death penalty. Bounded law is also intellectually restrictive because it points to the failings of societies, not their triumphs. Moreover, bounded law emphasizes what cannot be done instead of inspiring and empowering its people to what can be done. It has a negative anticipation. Bounded law A bounded law only system is not a laissez-faire morality, allowing for the maximum freedoms of its people by addressing only basic societal protections. It is clandestine oppression. In many ways, it's hypocritical by preventing violence with violence itself. Only recognizing bounded law prevents individuals from evaluating for themselves what is or not good and forces the individual to see the world in the black and white of crime and punishment. Punishment does not have a brain. It is a harmful consequence that does not change the hearts and minds. It does not necessarily improve lives. Law becomes vacuously moral as obedience does not signify a deep understanding of an action's merit as such in the world, but only one steeped in fear, threatened by the ossuature of violence inescapable in law. The central relationship government has with its people is one of castigation. Bounded law expects of its citizens an absence of action. In this way, it wishes for its citizens to be invisible. It is organized to rule by the threat and implementation of exclusion, punishment, and over time produces the discord that is now present in society: fear, animosity, and division. Those who do not obey these bounded mandates separate themselves from the public by dissent. In addition, bounded law may single out groups for specific regulation, and over time, divided peoples make society ripe for fragmentation, discord, and overall lacking in prosperity. What is essential to the role of government is cultivating and celebrating peace. When the authoritarian eye is directed towards the gutter, it does not gaze into the public sunlight. Bounded law blocks out the light with its own edifice. Suffering and transgression resonate within the bounds of our common house. It becomes haunted by the echoes of its operative features, fear and punishment, and its harmful aberrations caused by bounded law. That is, if we think of our justice system as a house in which we live in, and the walls are the bounds which are protected and enforced by punishment, what kind of fear is that create in your common house? What kind of echoes do you hear and live within when your house is engaged in a bounded law system where negative consequence is how you engage with your government? And now I would like to move on to unbounded law. In 1970, Joni Mitchell sent a telegram to California from Europe with a message to her lover, Graham Nash. If you hold sand too tightly in your hand, it will run through your fingers. A restricted, bounded system cannot contain all things. The need for balance in the legal system can be compared to the classroom, where if you anticipate your professor to only chastise you, only correct you, and not encourage and promote your learning and acknowledge your positive contributions in the classroom, that you will develop a relationship of fear or resentment towards that authoritarian figure. And that as a class or as a community, we need to acknowledge each other not only when we do something wrong or we need support in another area to grow, but also when we achieve something that positively impacts us as a community. Moreover, peace is a presence and not an absence. Government that enforces only by bounded law expects absence as a form of peace. But peace is a presence. It has its own body that must be encouraged, promoted, tended to, and that is exactly what unbounded law seeks to do. The definition: law which seeks to promote and recognize good action within a community, action which benefits either an individual or the community as a whole. Justice is more than acknowledging the failures of citizens, but also acknowledging their successes. It is through the acknowledgement of virtue that this law seeks to promote and maintain positive action and resolve harm. It is within a person that true government exists. The internal government is essential to the external one. We are all pillars in the house of justice, and our actions either support or disadvantage the structure. There would be no house without meritorious action that holds it up. the roof is in service to the pillars, and the pillars in service to the roof. And without the whole of its parts, the whole is forsaken. And if we take aesthetic ethics and directly place it into the context of unbounded law, the gaze, law needs to see people as beautiful, not just potential lawbreakers, but as people who positively contribute to society. The method, law has to take into consideration how it goes into effect and how it encourages or discourages behavior. It can't just punish people, it must also acknowledge people positively for how they contribute in a good way. The whole, how the law creates a resonant harmony. How is this law going to be when we live inside of it? What kind of resonance will it create for us as a people in our common house? And how law will reflect in the mirror, how law will reflect the agent and the agent's engagement with their community. You have to know how you as a person can see yourself in this law and how the individual can engage with the community in a harmonious way. In the virtue heuristic, law which assists citizens in avoiding the disjunctive virtue scenarios. So you have to figure out as a government, how am I going to make law that helps people achieve accomplishing as many virtues as possible and not being put into that disjunctive virtue situation where you have to choose one or the other and then a harm occurs as a result. In addition, law which takes virtue into account once it has occurred, so a post-harm scenario where we're able to look at an individual as a whole and find out what happened, what virtues were operative that led to the harm, and how can we learn from that? What meaningful takeaway can we have in the resolution process by examining the virtue heuristic? Moreover, special attention can be given to when virtues are in conflict and that one could have been preserved but were not. In that scenario, why did someone choose not to embody all virtues? They could have, but they did not. 2, when does a person choose an individual-centric virtue over a community-oriented one that causes a harm? Now I'm going to get to the practical application, the Peace Pin project. Okay. The Peace Pin is, I'm wearing one now, it is a bridge that police will be able to give to citizens in order to acknowledge positive action. They need to be able to acknowledge each other when we positively contribute to society and not just negatively do so. Police enforce law by punishment. However, a relationship founded on punishment incites fear and resentment. Enforcing a bounded law-only system is psychologically detrimental to police officers and to citizens. And 3, the growing tension increasingly marginalizes police and citizens, further worsening community relationships. Without symmetrical law, as described in classroom politics scenario, and the embrace of the virtue as essential to law and to human flourishing, there is a breakdown of the system. You may see today, if you are attending in person at Notre Dame, that I have some pins available for you to take a look at. You can see here's the back of the card and here's the front of the card. And I have been working with police departments to be able to give out these pins when they acknowledge good in their community, in order to not only engage with the community in a negative way, but also in a positive way. And I hope to further discuss this with you in our breakout sessions together and answer any questions that you may have. It has been an absolute pleasure presenting, and I look forward to further exploring these topics with you. Thank you.
If you'd like to know more about Sofia and her Unbounded Law project and her Peace Pins, go to www.unboundedlaw.com. Thank you for tuning in. We want to hear from you, your family, your friends, school, business, organization, or anything else you would like to share. Everybody has a story to tell, and we would love to shine a light on you. By getting to know one another, we create a solid foundation and a stronger community. Contact us at theresourcesb.com. Thank you to my amazing resource team for making this show come to life. Until next time, stay strong and be inspired.